cultural memory and kind of cultural hangover, as it were. In other words, people consider that this is the way things ought to be ordered, and so they tend to reinforce these principles when given the opportunity. And so the laws for the non-Muslim subjects, who are known as the protected people, or the zummis, the dhimmis, they are considered to have rebelled against, to be renegades against the truth of Islam and the reality of Muhammad as a prophet. And the Quran promises that they will suffer in this world as well as the next for that rejection and rebellion. And so they have to be made to feel subdued in the Islamic State. That is a religious responsibility coming from the presuppositions in Islamic theology that say that they have rejected this truth, and consequently they have to feel that rejection as a consequence, as they have to feel deprivations, they have to feel suffering as a consequence of their rebellion against God. And so the non-Muslim subjects of the Islamic State, and I quote, are obliged to comply with Islamic rules that pertain to the safety and indemnity of life, reputation, and property, which are the goals, the safeguard of which are some of the primary goals of Islamic law in general. And so they are distinguished from Muslims in dress, and that was because a Muslim is not to greet a non-Muslim with the traditional Islamic greeting, Assalamu alaikum, peace be upon you. Muslim to a non-Muslim is supposed to say, peace be upon those who are rightly guided. In other words, peace be on us, but not on you. And so you have to know whether the guy that you're walking up to is a Muslim or not. And so they had to wear, historically, to be distinguished from Muslims in dress, to keep to the side of the street. I remember a good friend of mine who grew up in Syria telling me that he remembers his grandfather telling him that when you're walking down the street, if a Muslim is passing, you have to get off the side, step off the sidewalk onto the street. They cannot build buildings as high as or higher than the Muslims' buildings, are forbidden to have religious displays, forbidden to build new churches or synagogues or repair old ones. So the community is in kind of a perpetual state of decline. And that's one of the things that continues in the Islamic world today. It's devilishly hard, so to speak, to get a permit to build a church in an Islamic country, even in Turkey or in Egypt, where things are a lot better than they are in some other areas. This is still considered to be somewhat, it's just not done that you build a church. This is an Islamic country. So even the Christians who predate the Muslims in those countries have to suffer this. They have to conform to the rules of Islam in regard to whatever those rules may be, insofar as they conflict with their own culture or society, and to pay this special tax from which the Muslims are exempt. Now, here's where we come back around to this discussion, the discussion we've been having about this discussion here today, and the discussion that the crowd had yesterday with the professor and the other guy. And the problem here is this. This is a contract of protection. That's what these people are called. They're called zummis or dhimmis. That is the protected people. They are protected from being attacked. They are protected by the Islamic State because they have submitted to the rule of Islam and to the overlordship of Islamic law. They are protected. But as soon as they step out of those bounds, as soon as they are not willingly submissive, as soon as they do not feel themselves subdued, as soon as they break one of these laws, then they're not protected anymore. The contract of protection is revoked and their lives are forfeit. And so, what can get the contract revoked? A dhimmi loses his contract of protection if he commits adultery with a Muslim woman or marries her, conceals spies of a hostile force, leads a Muslim away from Islam, kills a Muslim, or, and here's the one I want to spend some time on, mentions something impermissible about Allah, the Prophet, or Islam. Did you catch that? Mentions something impermissible about Allah, the Prophet, or Islam, or maybe puts up a picture that Muslims don't like. That is a revocation of the contract of protection, and then you can be killed lawfully. Now, coming back around to the beginning, I believe in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and I believe in freedom of speech. I very much believe in freedom of speech. And, somebody said yesterday, either the professor or the clown, I forget which, but one of them said that freedom of speech is, the antidote to bad speech is not censorship, it's more speech. And that is a very important principle. The founding fathers of the United States of America, they established the principle of freedom of speech because they were trying to escape a tyranny. The tyranny was restricting their ability to live their lives as they chose to live them, and making it difficult for them even to speak out against the tyrannical things that made their lives difficult. They knew, the founding fathers knew, that they had to protect free speech, even if it was offensive. As a matter of fact, non-offensive speech doesn't need any protection. Who cares? Nobody's going to try to restrict it. But freedom of speech that offends somebody has to be protected. Why? Because we want to give offense? We want to be obnoxious? Of course not. What we want to do is make sure that we are not tyrannized. We want to be able to make sure that we can have political dissent. We want to make sure that no group gains a protected status that gives it hegemony over other groups, such that it can impose its point of view upon the rest of us, and thereby have unbridled power. I believe in freedom of speech as a fundamental bulwark against that kind of tyranny. I don't believe in authoritarianism or totalitarianism. I believe they crush the human spirit. I believe that free dissent and free inquiry are absolutely essential to the life and health of any society that is going to do anything in this world to allow people to live a life that's worth living. And so, that means we all have to put up with some things we don't like. There are plenty of things that offend me in this world, and I'll tell you something, never am I going to raise my voice and say that that has to be silenced. I'd say, bring it on, let's talk about it. And then usually they don't want to talk, and they boycott instead. Now look, the Islamic law says that if you say something impermissible about Allah, Muhammad, or Islam, then you can be killed. That is not something out of a dusty law book that nobody's paying attention to. The organization of the Islamic Conference is 57 Muslim countries around the world today, or 56 Muslim countries, plus the Palestinian Authority. And it is the largest voting bloc since the collapse of the Soviet Union at the UN. Pretty much it can do anything at the UN it wants, as long as one of the states with its permanent seat on the Security Council doesn't veto it. And every year, since those cartoons, of which we are also fond, since those cartoons were published first, a few years back, about 5 years ago now, every year, the Organization of the Islamic Conference member states have introduced resolutions at the UN trying to compel member states of the United Nations to criminalize Islamophobia. Islamophobia being defined broadly as some sort of irrational hatred of Islam. Why anybody would hate anything, I can't understand. Although I'm accused of it a lot, I don't understand why telling the truth would be considered an act of hate by anybody except those who fear that truth. But in any case, be that as it may,